I had saved exactly $1 million for my children over the past 15 years, penny by penny, sacrifice by sacrifice. My 58th birthday was tomorrow, and I had planned the perfect surprise dinner where I would finally tell my twin daughters, Celeste and Aurora, about their inheritance. But as I sat alone at my dining table in Willowbrook at 11:30 p.m., staring at the untouched birthday cake and the sealed envelopes containing their $500,000 checks, neither of my daughters had shown up. Hold up! I'm curious where you're listening from, and if this story spoke to you, make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, what I have planned for tomorrow is going to blow you away. My name is Vivienne Hayes, and I thought I knew my children. I thought I had raised them with the same values that had driven me to work double shifts at Riverside General Hospital for over 2 decades. Every extra dollar from my nursing salary, every overtime payment, every holiday bonus had gone straight into their future. While other mothers my age were taking vacations or renovating their homes, I was calculating compound interest and researching the best investment accounts for my girls' futures. The money hadn't come easily. After my divorce from their father 8 years ago, I had moved from our spacious home in Elmhurst to this modest 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street. I sold my car and took the bus to work. I bought generic groceries and mended clothes instead of buying new ones. Every sacrifice was worth it because I was building something bigger than myself. I was securing my daughter's dreams. Celeste, now 26, had always talked about opening her own veterinary clinic. She'd graduated from Northfield University with honors, but student loans and the cost of starting a practice had kept her working at other people's clinics, never able to take the leap into entrepreneurship. Aurora, 24, was a talented graphic designer who dreamed of starting her own creative agency. She had the vision and the skills, but lacked the capital to leave her corporate job and pursue her passion. I had imagined their faces when I would hand them those envelopes tomorrow night. The relief, the gratitude, the realization that their mother had been quietly building their future while they weren't even watching. I had rehearsed the moment 1,000 times in my mind. "This is for your clinic, sweetheart," I would tell Celeste. "And this is for your agency, my darling," I would say to Aurora. Finally, they would understand why I had said no to so many things over the years, why I had been so careful with money, why their mother always seemed to be working. But here I was, alone on the eve of my birthday, my phone silent except for a single text from Celeste at 7 p.m. "Sorry, Mom, something came up at work. Rain check on dinner?" Aurora hadn't even bothered to text. I knew where they were. 3 hours ago, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson had knocked on my door with an expression I couldn't quite read. She'd been walking her dog past the Grandview Country Club when she saw something that made her stop. "Vivienne, dear," she had said hesitantly, "I think you should know. I saw your girls at that fancy restaurant downtown. They were with your ex-husband and his new wife." Veronica. Even thinking her name made my chest tighten. My ex-husband, Raymond, had remarried just 6 months after our divorce was finalized. Veronica Sterling was everything I wasn't. 15 years younger, blonde, well-connected in Willowbrook social circles, and most importantly, wealthy. She had inherited a chain of boutique hotels from her father and lived the kind of life I had never been able to provide my daughters. When Raymond first introduced Veronica to Celeste and Aurora, I had watched nervously as my daughters' eyes lit up. Here was a woman who wore designer clothes, drove a Tesla, and talked casually about weekend trips to Aspen and summers in the Hamptons. She immediately offered to help Aurora with networking opportunities and promised Celeste introductions to the right people in the veterinary world. I tried to tell myself it was good for my daughters to have more opportunities, more connections, but with each passing month, I noticed subtle changes. They started mentioning Veronica more often. Veronica says, Veronica thinks, Veronica offered. Their visits to my apartment became shorter and less frequent. They seemed uncomfortable with my modest lifestyle in ways they had never been before. The breaking point should have been obvious when they started calling her Mom V last Christmas. Not in front of me, of course. I only found out when Aurora accidentally sent me a text meant for her sister. Can't wait to see what Mom V got us for Christmas. Her gifts are always so thoughtful. The message was quickly followed by, "Sorry, wrong person." But the damage was done. Still, I had convinced myself that blood was thicker than water. I was their mother. The woman who had stayed up all night when they had fevers, who had saved every penny for their futures, who had never missed a school play or graduation ceremony even when it meant missing overtime pay. Surely, when it mattered most, they would choose me. But as midnight approached and my phone remained silent, I began to realize that perhaps I had been wrong about everything. Perhaps the life I had sacrificed to give them meant less than the lifestyle Veronica could offer them right now. Perhaps the mother who had saved $1 million for their dreams mattered less than the stepmother who could buy them designer handbags and introduce them to influential people. I looked at the 2 envelopes on my coffee table, each containing a check that represented 15 years of sacrifice, 15 years of choosing their futures over my present comfort. Tomorrow was my 58th birthday, and I had never felt more alone or more naive about the children I thought I knew. What I didn't know yet was that this birthday would change everything, not just for me, but for Celeste and Aurora, who were about to learn the true cost of their choices. We poured our hearts into researching and telling this story. If you're hooked, show some love with a subscribe. Now, where were we? I couldn't sleep that night. At 6 a.m., I was already dressed and walking down Willowbrook's main street when I ran into Dolores Martinez, who worked the night shift at Riverside General with me. She was coming off her shift, looking tired but with an odd expression on her face when she saw me. "Vivienne," she said carefully. I wasn't sure if I should mention this, but last night, during my break, I went to grab coffee at that new place next to Grandview Country Club. I saw something that, well, I thought you should know. My stomach dropped. "What did you see, Dolores?" She pulled out her phone and hesitated. I took a picture because I couldn't believe it myself. "I'm sorry, honey." She handed me her phone, and what I saw made my knees weak. There was my family, but not the family I knew. The photo showed the private dining room at Grandview's most expensive restaurant through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Raymond sat at the head of a long table, Veronica beside him in a stunning burgundy dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But it was my daughters who broke my heart. Celeste and Aurora were seated on either side of Veronica, leaning toward her like flowers toward the sun. Aurora had her hand on her arm, laughing at something she had said. Celeste was holding up her phone, clearly taking selfies with her stepmother. In the center of the table sat an elaborate 3-tier cake with "Happy Birthday, Veronica" written in gold script. "It was Veronica's birthday?" I whispered. Dolores nodded grimly. "That's not even the worst part, Vivienne. I watched them through the window for a few minutes. Your girls kept hugging her, and I could see them giving her gifts. Expensive-looking boxes with big ribbons. And then," she paused, looking like she didn't want to continue. "Tell me." They stood up and made toasts. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Aurora crying happy tears while she spoke. Then Celeste stood up and said something that made everyone raise their glasses. They looked like they were calling her, their mother. The coffee I had had that morning threatened to come back up. My daughters had skipped my birthday dinner to celebrate their stepmother's birthday instead. Not only that, but they had clearly planned it. Those expensive gifts didn't appear out of nowhere. "There's more," Dolores said quietly.
After you left work yesterday, I overheard Celeste talking to Dr. Brennan in the break room. She was asking him about some veterinary conference in Denver next month. She said Mom was going to pay for her to attend and that she might even get to present her research. I assumed she meant you, but now the pieces started falling into place. For weeks, Celeste had been excited about some mysterious opportunity that had come up. She'd been vague about the details, saying only that someone was helping her career. I had assumed she meant a colleague or mentor at work. I handed the phone back to Dolores and thanked her, though I felt nothing but grateful. As I walked home, my phone buzzed. A text from Aurora. "Hi, Mom. Sorry about last night. Work was crazy. Can we reschedule our dinner?" Work. The lie came so easily to her. But then another text came through, and this one wasn't meant for me. It was from Aurora to Celeste, but she had accidentally sent it to our family group chat. "Mom V's party was amazing. Did you see her face when we gave her the spa weekend? I'm so glad we decided to spend our savings on her instead of..." The message cut off there, probably because Aurora realized her mistake. Within seconds, she sent another message. "Sorry, wrong chat. Ignore that."
But I couldn't ignore it. They had spent their savings on Veronica. Their savings. Money I had helped them accumulate by paying for their groceries, their car insurance, their phone bills, so they could save more from their paychecks. Money that was supposed to be for their futures had been spent on spa weekends for their stepmother. My phone rang. It was Celeste, probably trying to do damage control. "Mom, about Aurora's text. Don't," I said quietly. "Just don't lie to me anymore." There was silence on the other end. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, Celeste said, "Mom, it's not what you think. Veronica has been so good to us. She's opening doors that we never could have opened ourselves. She introduced me to Dr. Hamilton at the animal hospital in Pinewood. He's offering me a partnership opportunity. And she's connected Aurora with the marketing director at Sterling Hotels. These are real chances, Mom." "And what about your mother's birthday?" I asked. "What about the woman who raised you and sacrificed everything for your futures?" Another pause. "Mom, you're being dramatic. We can celebrate your birthday anytime, but Veronica's connections, her influence, these opportunities don't come around often. We have to prioritize." Prioritize. The word hit me like a slap. I had prioritized my daughters for 15 years, and when it came time for them to prioritize me for one evening, I ranked below their stepmother's birthday party. "I see," I said. "And where exactly do I rank in your priorities, Celeste?" The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she said, "Mom, you'll always be important to us, but Veronica is our future. She can give us things She can help us in ways that you can't. Surely you understand that." I hung up without another word. Standing in my small apartment, looking at the 2 envelopes containing their inheritance, I realized that my daughters had already made their choice. They had chosen the woman who could give them immediate opportunities over the woman who had spent 15 years building their future. They had chosen networking events over family dinners, designer gifts over heartfelt savings, social status over genuine love. The worst part wasn't just that they had lied to me, it was that they clearly didn't see anything wrong with what they had done. In their minds, spending money I'd helped them save on their stepmother's birthday party while abandoning their actual mother was simply prioritizing their futures. But what they didn't know was that their real future, $1 million worth of it, was sitting right there on my coffee table, and after this conversation, I was beginning to wonder if they deserved it at all. After hanging up on Celeste, I found myself sitting on my couch, staring at old photo albums I hadn't opened in years. I needed to understand how we had gotten to this point. When had my daughters started viewing me as a burden rather than their mother? When had sacrifice become something to be ashamed of rather than honored? The marriage to Raymond had started falling apart long before Veronica appeared in our lives. We had been high school sweethearts in Willowbrook, married young and naive about what building a life together actually meant.
Raymond had big dreams. He wanted to be a real estate developer, to build shopping centers and luxury apartment complexes. But dreams don't pay bills. And while he chased one failed investment after another, I was the one keeping our family afloat. I remembered those early years when the twins were small. Raymond would come home excited about some new opportunity that required us to invest our savings. There was the strip mall in Riverside that never got the permits, the apartment complex in Northfield that fell through when his partner disappeared with the deposits, the restaurant franchise that failed within 6 months. Each time, Raymond convinced me that this would be the one, the investment that would set our family up for life. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts at the hospital, coming home exhausted to take care of 2 toddlers while Raymond attended investor meetings that often ended at bars with his buddies. I was the one getting up for midnight feedings, handling doctor appointments, and somehow stretching my nursing salary to cover both our living expenses and Raymond's next big venture. The breaking point came when the girls were 12. Raymond had convinced me to take out a second mortgage on our house to invest in a tech startup his college friend was launching. I had been reluctant, but he wore me down with promises about generational wealth and thinking bigger. Within 8 months, the startup folded and we lost $40,000, money I had been secretly hoping to start college funds for Celeste and Aurora. That night, I sat Raymond down and told him I was done. No more investments, no more opportunities, no more risking our family's security for his dreams. He looked at me like I had betrayed him, like I was the one being unreasonable. Vivienne, you think so small. You're content with just getting by, but I want more for our family. I want the girls to see what's possible when you take risks. I want the girls to have a roof over their heads and college funds. I want them to learn that security comes from hard work, not gambling.
That fundamental difference in values poisoned the rest of our marriage. Raymond began staying out later, coming home smelling like perfume, and making excuses about networking events. I threw myself deeper into work, picking up weekend shifts and holiday pay, building the stability he couldn't provide. The girls watched all of this, absorbing lessons about money, commitment, and what really mattered. Or so I thought. When Raymond finally asked for a divorce 8 years ago, he framed it as though I was the one holding him back. "You're too scared to dream big," he told me during one of our final arguments. "You've made yourself small, and you want to make me small too." Within weeks of our separation, he was dating Veronica Sterling, who he'd met at some real estate networking event. Veronica was everything I wasn't and couldn't be. Her late father had built the Sterling hotel chain from the ground up, and she had inherited not just money, but an entire business empire. She understood Raymond's language of investments and opportunities because she had been born into that world. More importantly, she could fund his dreams without risking the family grocery money. At first, the girls were resentful about the divorce. Celeste especially blamed me for breaking up the family. "Why couldn't you just support Dad's dreams?" she had asked me one tearful night. "Maybe if you had believed in him more, he wouldn't have left." I tried to explain that it wasn't about belief, it was about responsibility. That someone had to be the adult. Someone had to pay the bills and keep the lights on. But teenage girls don't want to hear about mortgage payments and practical decisions. They want to believe in magic and possibilities. When Raymond introduced them to Veronica 6 months later, I watched my daughter's attitudes shift dramatically. Here was proof that Raymond's dreams weren't impossible. He had just needed the right partner to believe in them. Veronica didn't just believe in his real estate ventures, she funded them. She bought him a new truck, helped him secure better investment properties, and treated his ideas with the respect I supposedly never had. The girls started spending alternate weekends at Raymond and Veronica's new house in Elmhurst Hills, the wealthy part of town I could never afford. They came back talking about private tennis lessons, shopping trips to the city, and conversations about building wealth and creating opportunities. Slowly, the life I provided, steady, secure, practical, began to look small by comparison. I watched Veronica work her magic on my daughters with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak.
She never criticized me directly, but she made sure the girls understood that there was a bigger world out there, a world of connections and possibilities that my mother's nursing salary couldn't access. She took them to charity galas where they met important people. She arranged internships through her business contacts. She taught them about personal branding and networking. Most cleverly, she made them feel sorry for me. Your mother works so hard. It must be exhausting, always worrying about money. I'm glad I can give you girls some of the experiences she can't afford. She positioned herself as the generous stepmother, supplementing their deprived childhood, rather than the woman who had married their father's money and connections. The transformation was gradual but relentless. Celeste started coming home from weekends at Veronica's house with new clothes and complaints about our small apartment. Aurora began asking why we couldn't take vacations like normal families. They stopped appreciating the sacrifices I made because Veronica had taught them to see those sacrifices as limitations rather than love. By the time they graduated high school, the shift was complete. They still loved me, but they respected Veronica. They still visited me, but they aspired to be like her. I was their mother, but she was their role model. The cruelest part was that Veronica was genuinely good to them. She wasn't evil or manipulative in any obvious way. She simply offered them a version of life that I couldn't compete with. One where money wasn't a constant worry, where opportunities appeared through connections rather than hard work, where dreams seemed achievable because someone else was willing to fund them. I had saved every penny for 15 years, believing that financial security was the greatest gift I could give my daughters. But Veronica had given them something I never could. The feeling that they deserved luxury, that they belonged in wealthy circles, that my mother's cautious approach to money was holding them back from their true potential. Now, sitting in my small apartment with their inheritance checks on the table, I finally understood the full scope of what I was up against. This wasn't just about choosing between two birthday parties. It was about choosing between two completely different philosophies of life, two different definitions of success, two different ideas about what kind of woman deserved their respect and loyalty. And for the first time in 15 years of sacrifice, I wasn't sure I had chosen the right philosophy after all. 3 days after my actual birthday, Aurora finally texted asking if we could have our rain check dinner. The casual tone, as if nothing significant had happened, made my hands shake with rage. But I agreed. It was time to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for years.
I chose Rosemary's Diner on Pine Street, a place where we'd celebrated small victories throughout their childhood. Good report cards, soccer wins, first jobs. If I was going to confront my daughters about who we'd all become, I wanted to do it somewhere that remembered who we used to be. Both girls arrived 20 minutes late, looking polished and confident in ways that reminded me uncomfortably of Veronica. Celeste wore a blazer I'd never seen before, something expensive that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Aurora had gotten highlights that gave her hair that salon-perfect look I could never afford for myself. "Mom," Aurora said brightly, sliding into the booth and giving me a quick hug that felt more like an obligation than affection. "You look good. How was your birthday? Sorry we had to postpone." The lie came so naturally to her that I almost admired it. There was no hesitation, no guilt in her eyes. She had completely rewritten history in her own mind. "My birthday was quiet," I said carefully. "Very quiet. Just me and Mrs. Patterson's casserole." Celeste looked momentarily uncomfortable, but Aurora just nodded sympathetically. "Oh, that's too bad. Well, we're here now. That's what matters, right?" I set my purse on the table and pulled out an envelope. Both girls' eyes immediately focused on it with the kind of interest that confirmed what I'd suspected. They thought this dinner was about money. They'd probably been coached by Veronica on how to handle whatever financial request their poor mother was about to make. "Before we order," I said, "I want to show you both something." I opened the envelope and pulled out a printed bank statement. Their eyes widened as they saw the balance. $1,247,382. "Mom," Celeste whispered, "what is this?" "This is what I've been building for the past 15 years.
Every double shift I worked, every vacation I didn't take, every dinner out I skipped, every piece of clothing I didn't buy myself. This money represents 15 years of choosing your futures over my present. Aurora leaned forward, studying the statement. You have over $1 million? I had planned to split it between you two, $500,000 each. Enough for Celeste to open her dream veterinary clinic, enough for Aurora to start her creative agency. I was going to tell you on my birthday, along with dinner I'd prepared specially for the occasion. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched their faces as the implications sank in. They hadn't just missed a birthday dinner, they'd missed the moment their lives were supposed to change forever. Finally, Celeste spoke. Mom, this is incredible. When can we... But then I discovered where you actually were that night. And I started questioning whether you deserved this money at all. Aurora's face flushed red. Mom, about that night. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't insult my intelligence with more lies. I know you were at Veronica's birthday party. I know you gave her expensive gifts bought with savings I helped you accumulate. I know you've been calling her Mom V for months. What I don't know is when exactly you decided that the woman who gave birth to you and sacrificed everything for you mattered less than the woman who married into wealth. Celeste's composure cracked first. Mom, it's not like that. Veronica has been really good to us. She's opened doors. Doors I couldn't open? I asked sharply. Opportunities I couldn't provide? Yes, Aurora burst out, then looked shocked at her own honesty. She glanced around the diner, then lowered her voice. Mom, I'm sorry, but yes, Veronica has connections you don't have, resources you can't access. She's introduced me to people who can actually help my career, not just encourage me from the sidelines. The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my voice steady. I see. And what exactly has Veronica done for your careers that's so valuable? Celeste jumped in eagerly. She introduced me to Dr. Hamilton at Pinewood Animal Hospital. He's offering me a junior partnership, something that would have taken me 10 years to achieve on my own. And she's connecting Aurora with the marketing team at Sterling Hotels. These are real opportunities, Mom. Opportunities that come with strings attached. What does Veronica expect in return for these favors? The sisters exchanged a look. A quick, guilty glance that told me everything. She doesn't expect anything, Aurora said unconvincingly. She just wants to help family. Family, I repeated. Is that what you call it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've traded your real family for a more profitable one. Celeste's face hardened. That's not fair, Mom. Just because you couldn't give us the same opportunities doesn't mean we should reject them when someone else offers. Someone else, I said softly. Not Dad's wife or our stepmother. Someone else. As if I'm just a stranger with opinions about your life choices.
You're being dramatic, Aurora snapped, and for a moment, she sounded exactly like her father. We're not rejecting you, we're just prioritizing our futures. Veronica understands ambition in a way that you don't. The mask was finally off. This was what they really thought, that I was small-minded, unambitious, someone who couldn't understand their grand plans because I'd never dreamed big enough myself. I understand ambition perfectly, I said, my voice getting dangerously quiet. I understand it so well that I've spent 15 years building something substantial for you instead of just talking about it. The difference is, my ambition was for your benefit, not my ego. But Mom, Celeste said desperately, don't you see? With Veronica's help, we can achieve so much more than we ever could on our own. She's teaching us about networking, about building wealth, about forgetting where you came from, I interrupted, about being ashamed of the mother who raised you, about learning to see love as limitation and manipulation as mentorship. Aurora's eyes flashed with anger. That's not what's happening. Veronica isn't manipulating us. She's showing us possibilities you never could. She's confident, successful, connected. She's everything we want to become. And what am I? I asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. I watched my daughters struggle with an answer, watched them try to find a way to express their truth without sounding cruel. Finally, Celeste spoke with devastating honesty. Mom, you're safe. You're stable. You work hard and you love us, and we appreciate that. But Veronica is inspirational. She makes us believe we can have more than just security. She's making us feel like we deserve luxury, success, recognition. When we're with her, we feel like the kind of women who belong in boardrooms and country clubs, not just small apartments and diners. The truth was finally out. I wasn't enough for them anymore. I was the reliable mother who provided the foundation, but Veronica was the exciting stepmother who offered the ceiling. I was yesterday's sacrifice. She was tomorrow's opportunity. I looked at my daughters, these young women I had shaped with 15 years of devotion, and realized I was looking at strangers. Strangers who had learned to be ashamed of where they came from and hungry for things they hadn't earned. Well then, I said, folding the bank statement and putting it back in my purse, I suppose you've made your choice. And now I'm going to make mine. What do you mean? Aurora asked, suddenly looking nervous. I stood up from the booth, leaving money on the table for my untouched coffee. I mean that if Veronica is your inspiration, your mentor, and your future, then she can be your inheritance too. The money I saved for daughters who valued sacrifice and hard work isn't suitable for women who prefer connections and shortcuts. Mom, wait! Celeste reached for my arm, but I pulled away. I taught you something important today. You taught me that love, without respect, is worthless. And you've made it very clear that while you may love me out of habit, you don't respect me, my choices, or my values. So why should I continue to sacrifice for people who see that sacrifice as failure? I walked out of Rosemary's Diner, knowing that everything between us had fundamentally changed. Behind me, I could hear Aurora calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I was done being the mother who begged for scraps of appreciation from daughters who had learned to see her love as limitation. It was time for Celeste and Aurora to discover what life looked like when the safety net they had taken for granted disappeared completely. The next morning, I walked into First National Bank of Willowbrook with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. By noon, I had established the Vivienne Hayes Foundation for Healthcare Workers' Children, a scholarship fund that would provide financial assistance to the sons and daughters of nurses, orderlies, and hospital staff who wanted to pursue higher education. The entire $1 million would be donated over the next 5 years, helping dozens of young people whose parents understood the value of service over status. This is quite generous, Mrs. Hayes. Are you sure you want to make this commitment irrevocable? I looked at the papers spread across her desk, legal documents that would ensure Celeste and Aurora could never inherit money that was now dedicated to honoring the kind of values they had rejected. Absolutely certain. Within 48 hours, both my daughters were calling me constantly. I let every call go to voicemail, but I listened to each message with a mixture of sadness and vindication. Celeste's first message was panicked. Mom, please call me back. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We need to talk about what happened at the diner. I was having a bad day and I didn't express myself well. Please, just call me. Aurora's approach was more calculated. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. You're right that we haven't been appreciative enough of your sacrifices. Maybe we could start having regular dinners, just the three of us. I think we've all been letting outside influences affect our family dynamic.
Outside influences. Even in her apology, she couldn't name Veronica as the problem. By the third day, their messages had shifted to desperation. Celeste had apparently confided in someone about the lost inheritance because her voice was thick with tears. Mom, I told Dr. Hamilton I needed to think about the partnership offer because I was expecting some family financial backing. Now he's asking questions about my stability. Please, we need to fix this. Aurora's message was more direct.
I know you're angry, and maybe we deserved it, but you can't destroy our futures because you're upset about one birthday dinner. That's not the mother who raised us. Please don't let your hurt feelings ruin our lives. Hurt feelings. As if 15 years of sacrifice had been negated by hurt feelings over one missed dinner? On the fourth day, Raymond called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Vivienne? His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? The girls are devastated. Celeste told me about some money you were planning to give them. You can't just take that away because they made one mistake. One mistake? I laughed, and the sound was sharper than I intended. Raymond, they chose your wife's birthday over mine. They spent their own savings on gifts for her while lying to me about work obligations. They told me to my face that she's inspirational while I'm just safe. This isn't about one mistake. This is about who they've become. They're young, he said defensively. They're trying to build their careers. Veronica has been helping them network, opening doors. And what have I been doing for the past 15 years? Playing house while you chased fantasies and failed investments? Working double shifts so they could have stable childhoods while you disappeared into your next big opportunity? Saving every penny so they could pursue their dreams without student loan debt? There was silence on the other end. Then, quietly, they didn't know about the money. They didn't know because they never asked. They never wondered how their mother was able to help with their expenses while living in a small apartment and taking the bus to work. They never questioned where their security came from. They just assumed it would always be there while they chased something more exciting. Vivienne, please, just think about what you're doing. Those girls love you. I know they love me, Raymond, but love isn't enough anymore. They don't respect me, and I finally understand that respect can't be bought or earned through sacrifice. It has to be given freely, and they've chosen to give theirs to someone else. I hung up before he could respond. The turning point came 2 weeks later. I was working a night shift at Riverside General when Dolores Martinez found me during break. She needs to see this, she said, handing me her phone with a social media post pulled up. It was Aurora's Instagram account. The photo showed her at what looked like an upscale networking event, posing with several professionally dressed women. The caption read, "So grateful for my mentor and second mom, Veronica Sterling, for introducing me to such incredible women in business. Some people are born to lift others up. Blessed, mentorship, future entrepreneur, grateful." The comments were full of praise for Veronica's generosity and Aurora's lucky situation. Several people had responded with fire emojis and comments like, "Queen V strikes again," and "Your stepmom is goals." But the final line of Aurora's caption that made my blood run cold. "When you find people who believe in your dreams, you hold on to them tight." She had publicly declared Veronica as her dream supporter, while completely erasing 15 years of my belief in her potential. To the world, she was a grateful stepdaughter whose stepmother had rescued her from limitation. I was simply absent from the narrative. 3 days later, I was grocery shopping when I ran into Patricia Henley, whose daughter worked with Aurora at the marketing firm. "Vivienne," she called out, approaching with an odd expression, "I wanted to tell you how proud you must be of Aurora. Sarah says she's been absolutely glowing lately, talking about some amazing opportunities coming her way." "That's wonderful," I said carefully. Patricia leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, Sarah mentioned that Aurora's stepmother is quite well connected. How lucky for the girls to have such a successful role model. You must be so grateful that she came into their lives." I stared at Patricia, realizing that this was how my daughters had reframed our family story. I wasn't the mother who had built their foundation. I was the grateful woman whose ex-husband had found someone better equipped to guide their children to success. "Excuse me," I said quietly.
and walked away before Patricia could see the tears in my eyes. That night, I made my second major decision. I put my apartment up for sale and began looking at properties in Crescent Bay, a coastal town 3 hours north where I'd always dreamed of living. With my hospital pension and the savings I'd always kept for myself, I could afford a small house near the ocean where I could finally live for myself alone. 2 months later, as I was packing the last of my belongings, Celeste and Aurora appeared at my door. They looked thinner, more stressed than I had ever seen them.
"Mom," Celeste said, her voice breaking, "please don't leave like this. We've been thinking about everything you said, and you're right. We took you for granted. We got caught up in opportunities and forgot about the person who made those opportunities possible." Aurora nodded frantically. "Dr. Hamilton's partnership offer fell through when I couldn't provide the financial backing he expected, and the marketing position at Sterling Hotels? They decided to go with someone who already had industry connections rather than train someone new. Veronica said she was sorry, but business is business." I looked at my daughters, really looked at them. They were scared, disappointed, and finally understanding that the glamorous opportunities they'd chosen over family stability weren't as solid as they'd appeared. "And now you want your backup plan?" I said gently. "No," Celeste said quickly. "Now we want our mother. We want the woman who never let us down, who never made promises she couldn't keep, who loved us enough to sacrifice for 15 years without asking for anything in return." For a moment, my heart softened. These were still my children, still the babies I'd rocked to sleep and the teenagers I'd worried about. But then Aurora added, "We know we can't have the money back, but maybe we could work something out, some kind of payment plan or loan structure. We promise we'll pay you back with interest once we get established." And there it was. Even in their apology, even in their apparent recognition of my worth, they were still thinking about money, still seeing me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be loved unconditionally. "No," I said simply. "The money is gone. It's helping young people whose parents work as hard as I did, but never had the chance to save $1 million. And I'm gone, too. I'm moving to Crescent Bay tomorrow to start the life I've been putting off for 15 years. But Mom, I love you both," I said, meaning it completely. But I finally love myself, too. And that means I can't keep being the mother who gives everything while asking for nothing in return. You'll figure out your lives just like millions of other young people do, through hard work, real sacrifice, and learning to value the people who truly matter. 6 months later, I was sitting on my porch in Crescent Bay, watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. My phone buzzed with the text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Marcus Thompson. I received the Vivienne Hayes Foundation Scholarship for nursing school. I wanted you to know that my mother worked 3 jobs to keep our family afloat after my father left, and this scholarship means I can become a nurse without her having to sacrifice even more. Thank you for believing in families like ours." I smiled, screenshotted the message, and added it to a folder on my phone labeled My Real Legacy. It contained dozens of similar messages from scholarship recipients, young people who understood the value of sacrifice because they'd lived it, who honored their parents' hard work instead of being ashamed of it. I never received another call from Celeste or Aurora, and I was finally okay with that. I had learned that some relationships are seasonal, even with your own children. My season of giving everything while receiving nothing in return was over. Now, I was living for myself, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world.